Hi, welcome back. Episode 10. We left off where the Son of Man was walking among the seven lampstands, and we said that the lampstand was a callback to the sanctuary. And I'm sorry, I mentioned sanctuary, and maybe someone doesn't understand sanctuary. Sanctuary was the shelter that God asked Moses to build while the Israelites were in the desert, in the wilderness. And this was a place where the presence of God resided. And it was made of a holy place and a most holy place. And the most holy place was where the Ark of the Covenant was. Remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones? And in the Ark of the Covenant was the 10 Commandments, among other things. And in the most holy place, you had a golden table with 12 loaves of bread, and then you had a golden lampstand. And that golden lampstand represents the light of God, which symbolizes Jesus, right? In the New Testament, Jesus says, I am the light. And so when John heard or saw that the Son of Man was walking among the seven lampstands, he remembered, okay, in Isaiah chapter 42, 6 and 7, Isaiah chapter 49, verse 6, God had called Israel to be a light to the Gentiles. But then when Jesus came and the Jews did not accept him as the Messiah, he transferred that calling from the Israelites to the church. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16 says, you are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand. And under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. And so the light is Jesus. And God is calling the church to be a lampstand to allow the light of Jesus to shine. So let's go back to Revelation chapter 1, because it says that the Son of Man was walking among the seven golden lampstands. And I'm going to show you right now in verse 20, chapter 1, verse 20, that when the Bible unlocks prophecy, the Bible is its own interpretation. When you don't understand something, many times the Bible will give you the answer, but you have to look for it. And so right here in verse 20, it says, the mystery of the seven stars which you saw in my right hand, and the seven golden lampstands. The seven stars are the angels of the seven churches, and the seven lampstands which you saw are the seven churches. And so the lampstand is a symbol of the seven churches that were mentioned in chapter 1, but also prophetically, it also symbolizes the prophetic church throughout history. And we'll get into more details as we study. But it says, right, that one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet and girded about the chest with a golden band. Verse 14, his head and hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a furnace, and his voice like the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun shining its strength. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and I am the last. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen, amen. Any clues on who this person is? Well, let's find out. Son of Man. For John's early church, they remembered that reference. If you go to Daniel chapter 7, the prophet Daniel had a vision, just like John had a vision. And Daniel chapter 7, this is what he saw in verse 13. And I was watching in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days. Son of Man. Who is that? But let's go verse 9. Let's go to verse 9. He says, this is Daniel. And I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. And his garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, his wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. The Ancient of Days is God himself. But then it says that as he was watching, one like the Son of Man came. Now notice that the Son of Man in Revelation chapter 1 looks like the Ancient of Days. Remember what I told you, that this is a revelation of Jesus. So for the early church, Jesus is saying, hey, after I returned and I went back to heaven, I'm with my Father. And remember, he says, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father. So now we are actually seeing Jesus as how he looks like. He looks like his Father. He is, so the Son of Man, let's just jump right at it, is Jesus. Look at Mark chapter 13. Mark chapter 13, verse 36. Mark chapter 13, verse 36 says, Mark chapter 13, verse 36 says, I'm sorry, 26. Mark chapter 13, verse 26 says, then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds, just like Daniel. Remember Daniel chapter 7? Jesus is saying, then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and then he will send his angels and gather together his elect from the four winds, from the farthest part of the earth to the farthest part of heaven. This is talking about the second coming of Jesus. So the Son of Man is who? The Son of Man is Jesus. So it's saying that Jesus is walking among the seven churches, the seven literal churches, and he's also going to be walking through the seven prophetic churches throughout time. And then when he says that, I am the first and I am the last, I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. But notice what he's wearing. He's clothed with a garment down to the feet. Jewish historian Josephus tells us that the high priest would wear this long robe, right? I want you to go to Exodus chapter 28. Exodus chapter 28, verse 4. Exodus chapter 28, verse 4. And you'll see that the high priest wore a long robe. Exodus chapter 28, verse 4 says, and these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, a skillfully woven tunic, a turban, a sash. So they shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother and his sons, that he may minister to me as a priest. But not only, right, was the priest would wear a robe. Isaiah chapter 22, verse 21 tells us, Isaiah chapter 22, verse 21 tells us, and I won't have time to read it because my time is running. Isaiah chapter 22, verse 21 tells us that high officials also wore robes, the kings and the queens. So here's what we're seeing. The revelation of Jesus in heaven, that he's letting the early church know that are being persecuted, and for us today, is that Jesus in heaven, he is a priest and he's also our king. He is wearing the garments of a priest and a king. And the resurrected Jesus looks like the eternal one of God. So he's letting the early church know that are persecuted, hey, this Jesus that went, I am unveiling to you that he is God. He is the eternal one that Daniel saw. He is the one that's with us in the seven churches now, and for us living in 2020, he is the priest and king that's with us today. And that is the lesson of Jesus in the revelation from my yellow chair. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.